What's up, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of the CBB Yapper. For today's episode, we're going to go over the games that I pointed out on Sunday as the games to watch. We're going to touch briefly on this Charles Bediako situation, discuss some of the AP poll rankings that came out on Monday, and preview some of the matchups coming up this weekend that I'm really looking forward to watching. Without further ado, let's get into it. To start the show, I wanted to get into some of the games that I pointed out on Sunday's episode for the games to watch in the beginning of this week, starting out with St. John's and Seton Hall. This game certainly did not go how I expected it to or how I talked about it on Sunday. Seton Hall jumped out to an early lead, which was not what I was expecting. They really played really good offense in the first half, especially after I really trashed how bad they were on offense last week. They really impressed me in the first half of this game. However, the second half, they kind of returned back to normal, just a really inefficient offense in the second half, and buckets really came hard to come by. And St. John's really impressed me as well. I thought that their fight in the second half was awesome to see, especially after them kind of rolling over in some of these games earlier where they got down to bigger leads and just kind of went on autopilot for the rest of the game. This game, they did not. They came back from a 15-point deficit and came back and beat a very good defensive Seton Hall team. Obviously, Seton Hall's offense is just so lackluster right now that it really is just becoming very hard for them to close these kinds of games out. But I thought it was a really impressive win for St. John's and also for Seton Hall in a sense as well. I'm personally not going to be as hard on them just because I think that they came out and showed me a little bit what I was looking for. But ultimately, I think a lot of the questions still remain. They're still just not a good enough shooting team. I think they went 5 of 13, which is actually not a bad percentage, especially compared to how bad St. John's shot as well. But it's just not good enough. It's not near enough volume to be able to sustain that type of offensive output, especially when you look at their second half and how horrible their offense was. It's still a very, very, very glaring question for me about this Seton Hall team. I still do not personally believe that they're a top 25 team at this moment. I think they could certainly turn it around here, especially with how good their defense is. If they can figure it out on offense, they are going to be a very good team, and they could potentially give a couple teams a run for their money in March. But as of right now, they're on the outside looking in and just have too many questions that they need to address and fix before I call them a good team. Moving on, that same night we had Arkansas and Vanderbilt. This was a game that I previewed on Sunday and was really looking forward to. Obviously, they both were just in very high-paced games on Saturday, but I thought that this was going to be another high-paced game. It was for Arkansas, but for Vanderbilt, man, they were really just outmatched from the start. It was a complete rout, and it was never competitive at any point. It never felt like Vanderbilt was even going to threaten Arkansas at all. But I think that this game was really telling about Arkansas. They've been playing really well lately and played extremely well that night. They had 6 players in double figures, and Pringle was sitting outside of 10 with 8. So I just think that just shows how many options they have on offense, and how deep they are. But yeah, this just really raised some questions about the SEC for me. They're just a really weird conference this year. Last year they were definitely elite. They had 2 of the best teams in recent college basketball history, according to KenPom. And this year, I think, is just a little bit different. I don't think that they're nearly as elite as they were last year, but I think they have a lot of depth. I think they have a lot of teams who are good. They just don't have those elite teams this year as they did before. I think Vanderbilt, Arkansas, Tennessee, Kentucky, and there's others, obviously, like Florida. But I just think they're all very good. I don't think that they are elite teams. They certainly aren't top five teams, but I think they're very good. And I think that the SEC will have a lot of teams make it to the second weekend. But in terms of going much further than that, I don't know. It's a very weird conference to watch. I'm going to continue to circle games in this conference just because I think it's a very entertaining conference. I personally do not believe that they're as talented as they were, like I said, last year, but it's certainly a fun conference to watch. What I'm going to be really looking forward to is Vanderbilt here. They really need to bounce back on Saturday against a weak Mississippi State team. I would expect them to win that game by at least 10 plus, and would really like to see them win it by more just to remove some of the questions that I have on them as of right now. But yeah, they went from a top 10 team, top 15 team to potentially being unranked here very shortly, especially if they lose to that Mississippi State game on Saturday. Excuse me. They're going to drop out of the rankings. And the last game I pointed out on Sunday was Kentucky versus Texas, which took place last night. That first half was awesome. It was a really high scoring, back and forth the entire time, and just really competitive. However, the second half, Kentucky really jumped out right away and kind of controlled the first 15 minutes of that half. And then Texas rallied late, or tried to at least. They brought it within two and just needed one stop to get a chance to tie it. But Aberdeen had a really good play, just a really smart play for coming from a senior guard. Got into the paint, used his pump fake, drew Vocatitis in the air, and got to the free throw line to kind of seal the game for him. I just thought that that was a really savvy play by a really smart senior guard. And Kentucky is really just building momentum right now. This is a team that I did not even mention in my honorable mentions when we were going over my top 25 rankings. But I think it's certainly a team that definitely deserves to be there right now. They have been playing a really good ball recently. I know that they dropped a couple tough losses recently as well, but it is the SEC. It's a very competitive conference. Most of those games are going to be good on a nightly basis, so I try not to take their tough losses too hardly on them. But this Cam Williams loss, man, that's just really sad. He's a really good player. He's a really good shooter and provides them a different look on offense and provides them a lot of free throw shooting as well. That is really going to be a big missing piece come March, especially in March when games get closer. You need to have those guards at the end who can knock down free throws for you and take care of the ball. Losing Cam Williams is going to be a very big loss in that aspect. He was shooting almost 94% from the free throw line, which is near the top in the nation. And he only played 20 minutes per game, but he really did add a lot to this Kentucky team, especially depth at the guard position. They've already been dealing with some injuries as well, so this is just going to be a really big loss. But Moreno, that kid has really been playing really good ball recently. In his past two games, he's got 9 blocks. So he's averaging 4.5 blocks per game in his past two games. I think that's really impressive and going to be a really huge piece for Kentucky to have coming down the stretch here. Just having someone that can protect the rim at that high of a rate is just awesome to have. Averaging 4.5 blocks per game is insane, something that's not really heard of. But yeah, if he can keep continuing to defend the rim, I think Kentucky is going to continue to trend up here. But that loss to Cam Williams certainly is going to hurt. And yeah, really looking forward to seeing how Kentucky can bounce back and potentially find more depth on their bench, just because they have a lot of pieces that could potentially play more minutes. But yeah, just moving forward, just a really tough loss and could potentially show in March as well. Moving on, I wanted to briefly touch on these AP poll rankings that came out on Monday. I do want to preface this by saying, try to not let these rankings bother you as much as they do me. I try to say the same thing every week. AP poll rankings do not matter. And then I look at their rankings and I just struggle to believe that these people actually have to watch the games. The most glaring thing on this list to me was UNC being ranked. Personally, I watched both of their games from last week in their entirety. I have no clue how you watch those games and don't think that there were teams left off of this top 25 list that are playing better than them right now. I can name two off the top of my head. I'll talk about them a little bit more in depth here shortly. But yeah, this UNC team does not deserve this ranking. I personally believe it has mostly to do with their name. I personally just do not see any other reason for them to be in the top 25. They dropped two games to two teams who are unranked and not even receiving votes last week. I get it. Trips out west for East Coast teams are not easy. However, Duke was able to do the same thing to the same teams that they played and routed one of them. The other game wasn't even really close. It was a little bit closer, but it really wasn't close. It was a 10-point win, 10-plus point win for Duke. So I don't really want to hear those excuses. If you're good enough, you can beat those teams. Those are not good teams. They have no business beating a team like UNC, and certainly have no business beating a team like UNC in back-to-back games. I think that should have dropped them out of the top 25. There are teams that are behind them that certainly deserve that ranking over them. Maybe this is just my bias pouring through as a Duke fan, but yeah, I really struggle to comprehend how this team deserved a top 25 ranking and would love to hear any reasoning from any other fans who can comprehend it. If you have that reasoning, go ahead and drop it in my comment section because I'd really love to read into it. And as I mentioned, I do have two teams at least that I think deserve to be in these top 25 rankings. I'm not even just going to single out UNC here. I think these two teams could have been in over a number of teams. Starting out with St. John's, I absolutely think they deserve to be ranked, especially after how they've played the past 2 weeks. They beat Villanova on Saturday, which was a huge win for them. I get it. The Big East is not necessarily a powerhouse this year, but they're still the second best team in the Big East, and I think that they deserve a little bit more love than what they're showing. I personally believe what's happening here is they're holding St. John's total schedule against them and how they played in the beginning of the year versus how they're playing right now, and how UNC played in the beginning of the year and some of their big wins that they rattled off in the beginning of the year versus how they're playing right now. That is my biggest hang-up. I think St. John's is absolutely playing better ball right now than UNC. I don't even think that's really a discussion. I personally won't even hear an argument. If you'd like to argue it, go ahead and argue it in my comment section. But yeah, I personally do not see any argument or any angle that you can take where you are ranking UNC ahead of St. John's. I get that Seton Hall win came on Tuesday night, so it's not like they could have incorporated that into the rankings. Completely understand that. But yeah, just really struggling to believe that this UNC team deserves that nod over them and even over Wisconsin. I think Wisconsin's another team that could have been in over a number of teams as well. They have been playing great ball recently. They've rattled off 4 wins in a row. They beat the number 1 team in the nation at the time in that time frame as well. And I just think that they deserve it. They're playing much better ball than UNC right now. They have not dropped two games to 2 teams that they shouldn't have. They've actually pulled them out and won them. I don't necessarily think that they're more talented than some of these teams that are in the top 25. Just more of consistency. I don't understand how you can have one of the best wins in the nation and be playing such good ball right now and just be completely omitted from the top 25 teams when there's a team like UNC in there who is clearly not playing good ball right now. I do think that UNC is a very talented team. I think that they will be a top 25 team by the end of the year. I do just want to make sure that I'm very clear on that. I just do not think that they deserve this ranking as of right now, not this week. They did come away with a huge win against Notre Dame. It's Notre Dame. They stink. Their coach is fighting players or people after the game. Like, what are we doing here? That should put no stock into this UNC team at all. They really need to prove it this weekend with their big upcoming game that I'll discuss later. Another thing that really raised my eyebrows at this list as well is Iowa State's ranking. They are still in the top 10 after a really terrible week last week. They got blown out by Kansas and then almost a double-digit loss to Cincinnati. again, they came out and had a huge 30-point win, I believe, last night against UCF. UCF is a good team. They're not great. They're more average than anything. I'd get that they were just ranked in the top 25 last week, but then they dropped some really poor games. So, again, I do not put much stock into them kicking the crap out of a team like that. But yeah, I personally just do not see any realistic situation where Iowa State deserves to be top 10. I personally dropped them all the way to top 16. I have them right behind Florida and UVA. I think those teams are certainly playing much better ball than them right now. And I think my biggest hang up with the AP poll is it seems to kind of calculate their entire year as a whole rather than how they're playing right now. I think especially come March, it's more about how you're playing currently, not what you did in October or November. So this type of thing shouldn't bother me. I get it. It really does not matter, but it certainly deserves conversation, I believe. AP poll rankings are just so bad. I just really think that they're just really bad. It just seems like there's a lot of bias that gets influenced into these rankings. I get it. A lot of these reporters who are voting on these polls are covering certain teams or certain leagues or certain conferences. So I understand why they hold a little bit of bias. But I personally believe if you're voting on these polls, you should have to watch every single team. You should not just be able to watch your own league and then box score watch for other teams around the country and ultimately provide a ranking for them. I just think it's a little unfair. A lot of teams get disrespected because of this, such as Miami, Ohio, and St. Louis, who now have finally cracked the top 25, which is awesome to see. But yeah, I just think teams should get rewarded for winning more than strength of schedule. Strength of schedule should absolutely play a part in their rankings. Not saying it doesn't matter, but I think current play and current results and recent results is more important than how good you played in Kansas when you might have had a different roster or a different starting five or different players coming off the bench. I mean, teams have injuries now and have had changes to their starting lineups and things like that where they might be playing better or worse. So I just think it should be more about recent results rather than the entire resume as a whole. But nonetheless, that's how they ranked it. I personally disagree with it, but do not want to spend too much of my time or too much of my breath on it. Just wanted to give some comments at least on the poll because I really disagreed with some of the things that they had. Moving on from the top 25 rankings, I did want to briefly touch on this Alabama situation with Charles Bediako. Listen, this is just going to keep happening, especially because of how these are being ruled in the courts. I just think that there's going to be a lot more players who aren't getting time on NBA rosters or who didn't make an NBA roster trying to come back and get eligibility in college. Now, the NCAA did deny his eligibility right away for Bediako. They appealed it and got a temporary restraining order from a judge, which I believe lasts only 10 days. However, now he is eligible to play, and it does seem like he might even play this weekend against Tennessee, probably on a minutes restriction, but it does seem like he will be playing. Listen, this is just such a tough topic. There's not a lot of clarity on how this is being ruled, how this is being addressed, and how this is being approached. Obviously, the NCAA has stayed firm. If you sign an NBA contract or a professional contract, you lose your eligibility for college basketball or college sports. However, it seems like there's some loopholes that they can go through with these temporary restraining orders and reinstating their eligibility just based on them not playing in an NBA game. I don't necessarily know all the ins and outs of it. I've tried to and keep up with it a little bit as much as I can, but the situation's still unresolved. There's really not a lot of clarity on it. All I know is that as of right now, Bediako is eligible to play. He is practicing with Bama, and it does look like he is going to make his debut against Tennessee on Saturday. Personally, I'd like to see the NCAA figure a way out to stop this kind of stuff. I understand it from Bediako's perspective, as well as James Najee, who is the other one at Baylor, who did something very similar. They're just trying to do what's best for their careers. I completely understand it. I don't necessarily agree with it, but I don't necessarily hold that against them either specifically. I think this is mostly agents just trying to get the most money that they can. They see an opportunity to abuse the system that is the NCAA right now, which is just such a poorly run organization, and they try to take advantage of it. These are the same agents that give these dudes the advice to leave college early to go to the NBA and ends up hurting them because they get lost in the G League or stuff like that because they aren't ready for the NBA. I personally think that if you forego your eligibility and decide to go into the draft, that is your own decision. You are choosing to forego your eligibility. You did that at the time, knowing that you would most likely never be able to go back to college and play college ball. It takes away from high school kids that are coming in looking for scholarships and opportunities to display what they have as well, which is another piece of it that I just really do not like. But it's going to continue to happen until the NCAA can figure out a way to prevent this. I personally do not see a clear way forward right now, and it's really going to start to tick off some of the diehard college basketball fans. I know personally a lot of the people that I talk to are not happy about this. They are not happy about the way this is going. I know a lot of the college basketball teams are not happy about the way this is going and how this is being handled, and kids going to the NBA to come back to college 3 years later. I think there personally has to be an age limit, one. I do not think that if you are above the age of 22, you should be able to be reinstated for eligibility in college basketball unless there is some ridiculous circumstance that prevented you from playing or something like that, or a health circumstance. That is completely different. But if you just foregoed your eligibility to test out the NBA waters and stayed in the draft just to go undrafted and then realize, maybe I want to go back to college now. No, that should not be allowed. I personally do not think that that should ever be allowed, but as of right now, legally, it is. Another comment that I did just want to leave, just seeing how James Najee got some hate and things like that. Leave these kids alone, man. It's not their fault. They might be getting bad advice from agents or other people in their lives that are making them act on these decisions, but it's not their fault. They're kids. They're still under 25 years old. They might not make the best decisions, and you have to realize that they most likely have someone else in their life that is influencing them to make these decisions or telling them that it's a good idea. I'd like to see this end really shortly here, but it looks like this is going to be an ongoing situation. And it looks like there's going to be more players who try to test this out as well. I do not think that Bediako is going to be the last one. Hopefully, there's some clarity here in the next week on how this situation is going to develop. That should probably give us more of an idea of how the NCAA is going to handle this in the future. But like I said, as of right now, there's just not much else to say other than personal opinions on it. Moving on from that odd situation, I wanted to discuss some of the games that I have circled for the rest of this week before we end today's show. Starting out, I wanted to get another look at St. Louis. They take on the Bonnies of St. Bonaventure tomorrow night, which is Friday. I believe that game's going to tip at 5:30, so I'm going to need to take off work a little bit early to be able to watch that game in its entirety. I get it. St. Bonaventure is at the bottom of the conference, but it's still an in-conference game, and I just really want to get another look at St. Louis now that they're ranked. I saw that they had a really close game against Duquesne on Tuesday. But yeah, just hoping to see them continue their dominance here. I personally still think that they're going to run this conference, but George Mason is another team to watch out for as well. They've been playing some really good ball recently. I'll probably circle that game upcoming when St. Louis and George Mason play. But yeah, as of right now, just want to get another look at St. Louis. I get it. It's probably not going to be a very competitive game, but I just want to see what St. Louis has still. And just get a look at them now that they're finally ranked in the top 25, which I think they very much deserve. Moving on to Saturday, I have Villanova versus UConn. Obviously, Villanova dropped a tough one last weekend to St. John's, which moved them down a little bit. I personally believe if they would have won that game, they would be in the top 25. But losing that game, they probably dropped to around the 30 mark. I just think this is going to be a really good game. I think UConn is a more talented team than Villanova, but I think Villanova is a more scrappy team and a more gritty team. I am really excited to see how Caden Lewis performs in this matchup. I have pointed him out multiple times in a couple episodes that I've released here, and I just really like his game. I'd really look to see for him to kind of control the offense for Villanova in this one and try and keep them at a good pace with UConn. But I do just think UConn has a little more talent and should get the win at home. But I'll be looking for Nova to get an upset in this one as well. I really do think they have the potential to upset the Huskies. And obviously, I'm going to be rooting for it as a Duke fan. I'd love to see my Duke Blue Devils go up another spot after Purdue lost on Monday. But yeah, I think this is just going to be another really good game. I think it'll be very close. It's a Big East matchup, so it should be really good. And look for Nova to potentially upset UConn, but I think UConn will pull this one out in the end. After the Villanova-UConn game, we have UNC versus Virginia. This is going to be a top ACC matchup. I think these are two of the better teams in the ACC, even though I talked a little extensively about UNC and how they didn't deserve the top 25 ranking, how poorly they've played in the past couple of weeks, their lack of guard play. But they have a huge opportunity to shut me up here. If they come out and win this game, I will have a big segment on Sunday about how wrong I was about UNC and how they did deserve their top 25 ranking. But until then, it's just going to be all opinion and speculation. I personally think that this UVA team is certainly better than UNC at this point. I think that they're going to come out and win this game. And they really need to as well, just to stay tied for second place in the ACC. And if Duke loses to Wake Forest, they could move into tied for first for the ACC. So this is just a huge game for both teams. It's going to have big implications on ACC seeding for the rest of the year. And yeah, I'm just really excited to see how UNC can bounce back and try and prove me wrong. I know they're obviously not going to be listening to anything that I say, but I'm sure that they're getting it from all over the place. I just really don't think that many people who watch college basketball at this point are speaking highly of UNC as of right now. But if they come out and win this game versus UVA, I'm sure that the tune will change at least a little bit. Following that UVA and UNC game, this is personally my favorite matchup of the day and probably of the entire week. But we have Texas Tech and Houston. We saw this game a little over 2 weeks ago. It was at Houston the first time. Now it's at Texas Tech. And I personally would love to see Texas Tech pull out an upset here. Maybe that's part of my grudge against Houston and what they did to my Duke Blue Devils last year in the Final Four. But I just really think that this Texas Tech team is legit and would like to be validated, in my opinion, on that. I have had them in the top 15 in my rankings, at least for the past 2 weeks, and think that if they can win this game, they should move into the top 10. I personally believe even if they lose this game, that they deserve to be in the top 10 conversations. I don't know if I would necessarily put them in the top 10 if they lose this game, but I still think they'll deserve to be in the top 10 conversations. Houston is a very good team, and they're really going to try and turn up the defensive intensity there in Texas Tech. But I just am looking forward to a really high-level matchup. These are two of the best teams in the nation and two of the teams that I think will be in the Sweet 16 come March. So I'm really looking forward to seeing this rematch and how this one turns out. And the last game I have circled here on Saturday is Alabama versus Tennessee. One of the main reasons I want to watch this is to see if Charles Bediako does end up playing. I think that's just a really interesting storyline to be watching here. I'm interested to see how he has developed since he's been in the G League after being in college I think he was in college for 3 years and then went to the G League. So I'm interested to see how he developed in those 2 years in the NBA. Obviously, I don't know how much he will play. If he does, he'll most likely be on a minutes restriction just because they were only able to add him to the roster this week. But I'm really interested to see if he does play and his development, obviously, from the last time he played at Bama. But I think this is just going to be a really good game. Both of these teams have been hit or miss all year. Both have some great wins. Both have some great bad losses. But I think this is just an ultimate matchup of opposing coaches and opposing philosophies. You got Coach Barnes on one hand, who prides himself on defense and trying to grind teams out in half court and making them get into their sets and half court sets, while Bama really likes to push it. They are an offensive juggernaut and really seem to just not play defense at all. So I think it'll just be really fun to see these two coaches go against each other and see which team is able to control the pace to their liking. I think Tennessee's going to try and slow the game down. They're going to try and get Bama into their half-court sets and limit their transition, while Bama's going to try and beat Tennessee's defense down the floor and get easy buckets that way. I think if Bama can push the pace and get it into a shootout, they'll run away with it. But if it gets into more of a half-court game and Tennessee can control the pace a little bit and make Bama play slower, I really like Tennessee's chances to pull this one off. I think when Bama gets into those types of games, they really start to struggle. But yeah, it's just going to come down to the pace of play. If the pace of play is high, I think Bama will run away with it. But if the pace of play is slow, I really think Tennessee can pull this one off. But that's all for today's episode. I appreciate everyone for listening along. If you enjoyed, go ahead and leave a like, subscribe, and look for new episodes on Sundays and Thursdays.